In 1073, Pope Gregory VII issued a strict directive to gather every accessible manuscript by the Greek poet Sappho and burn them in public. The Vatican claimed the fires were about obscenity, but the real threat was her philosophy. Sappho was decentralizing the divine, moving supreme worship away from the untouchable gods of Olympus and placing it directly into the human heart. We usually picture her holding a lyre, looking wistful. The reality is much sharper. Sappho was a heavily backed political exile returning from Sicily with an army of loyal followers. She was the charismatic architect of a new religion. She held absolute cultural dominance. She had the numbers, the wealth, and the sheer magnetism to conquer the ancient Mediterranean. But she made a single catastrophic strategic error. If she had played her hand differently, our modern institutions might be built on the logic of aesthetics and empathy, rather than the rigid dogmas that eventually replaced her. The year is 590 BC. The Aegean Sea is tearing itself apart. On the island of Lesbos, rival aristocratic families are slaughtering each other in a series of brutal, seemingly endless civil wars. Emerging from this bloodbath is a dictator named Pittacus. He represents the old world, a cold, traditional power structure built entirely on violence and political suppression. Historians often classify Sappho's community, the Thiassos, as a finishing school for young girls, but the Thiassos functioned more like a systematic training ground, using music, ritual, and shared emotional intensity to forge a network of elite women loyal to a new vision of power. With her influence at its absolute peak, she had the leverage to draft a political manifesto, a constitution based on sensory knowledge and emotional intelligence. Instead, she brokered a peace deal with Pittacus. She chose to retreat into the shadows and write lyric poetry. By allowing her ideology to be categorized as art rather than enforceable law, she surrendered her authority. She traded the chance to build a theocracy for a comfortable place as a cultural icon. To turn Lesbos into a superpower of pleasure, she needed 3 ruthless moves. Step 1. Canonization. Her poetry could not remain subjective. She needed to declare her words as unalterable divine revelation, cementing her aesthetic views as religious doctrine. Centuries later, emperors like Constantine would use religion in exactly this way, turning spiritual belief into the legal framework required to solidify collapsing empires. Step 2. Economic monopoly. Restricting access to Lesbos's luxury perfumes and textiles forces rival nations into economic dependence. Step 3. Diplomatic weaponry. Marrying her elite followers to rulers of Egypt, Persia, and Lydia establishes an inescapable global shadow network. But she couldn't do it. Sappho famously wrote, "Some say a cavalry, some an infantry, but I say the most beautiful thing is what you love." It is a stunning sentiment, but it is a political weakness. To build a lasting institution, she needed the cruelty to enforce her personal definition of beauty as the only acceptable law. A world based on Sappho's focus on the senses and the subjective human experience would have developed according to a different logic. Where our architecture follows rigid geometric rules, a society prioritizing the human form might favor fluid, organic design, mirroring the body rather than the machine. Even our technology would likely shift focus. Instead of mastering the external physics of the machine, we might have prioritized the internal biology of the human body, seeking to refine and extend the experience of life itself. But she yielded, and the power vacuum she left on the Aegean was filled by the forces of patriarchal rationalism. Thinkers like Aristotle arrived and methodically severed the human spirit from the physical body. They built a philosophy of mechanics, categorization, and strict logic. Our modern obsession with efficiency and bodily shame is the direct fallout of this ancient clash. The logic of the mind simply outmaneuvered the religion of beauty. Today, we live in the functioning ruins of that rationalist victory. We inhabit a logical machine that is completely starved for underlying meaning. The ruins of the Vatican Library remind us that even the most revolutionary ideas are fragile. Sappho proved that beauty can sway a population, But without the hard scaffolding of a state or a legal code, that influence is vulnerable to the first person willing to use a torch. If you want to change the world, simply sharing your authentic truth is useless. You have to architect a system that makes your truth inevitable. Sappho demonstrated that deep human emotion has the potential to reshape civilization. But her legacy is also a warning. Unless that emotion is forged into a system, it remains a fleeting spark, one she ultimately chose not to fan into a fire.